People are sick of virtue signaling. They think, why are you lecturing me? You're going to an award ceremony in a limo, and you're telling me to recycle? Pfft, hardly. That's Ricky Gervais. I don't know where that was at, but it's at the place where things happen.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our scullery wenches were just rated the #1 sluttiest in the whole kingdom for the 8th year in a row. Hat tip to our good friends at TripAdvisor. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Good to have you with us tonight. And without any further ado or bush beating or tomfoolery, we present here for your kind consideration Curmudgeon's Field Guide to Celebrity Activism. Prologue. When actors ranked just above pickpockets. There was a time, not so very long ago in the grand sweep of things, but far enough removed that it may as well be the Bronze Age to modern sensibilities, when the acting profession occupied a social station roughly equivalent to that of a traveling card sharp or a riverboat gambler or a gentleman who insists on explaining cryptocurrency to strangers at dinner parties. Which is to say, it was tolerated, it was occasionally amusing, but these people were not to be trusted with anything of real consequence. In the 18th and 19th centuries, actors were widely regarded as fairly morally dubious figures. They were itinerant by necessity, dependent on public favor, prone to scandal, and engaged in the peculiar occupation of pretending to be other people for money, a line of work that in most other contexts would have been considered grounds for legal inquiry. There were famous actors, certainly. The stage produced its stars, audiences applauded, newspapers gossiped, but admiration did not translate into authority. No one, upon exiting a theater, felt compelled to wonder out loud, I wonder what that fellow thinks about tariff policy. Fame in those days was not to be confused with wisdom. And in the American context, the profession suffered from a public relations catastrophe from which it did not quickly recover. The fact that one of its more notable practitioners, a man by the name of John Wilkes Booth, decided, quite without consulting his industry peers, that the proper use of theatrical skill was to murder Abraham Lincoln. Now, it would be unfair to judge an entire profession by the actions of one man. However, history is not always in the business of being fair, and the optics here were, shall we say, decidedly suboptimal. The result was that for decades thereafter, the idea of actors possessing any kind of moral authority, let alone political authority, was treated with the sort of skepticism normally reserved for miracle tonics and mail order aristocracies. They were entertainers. They existed to perform, to amuse, to distract, and that was the beginning and the end of the arrangement. And this is an important baseline to establish because it reminds us of a lost cultural instinct. That visibility is not the same thing as credibility. That being watched is not the same thing as being wise. That just because a man can convincingly portray a king on stage does not mean he ought to be consulted on matters of statecraft. It is an instinct that we once possessed. We will now observe, step by step, how we managed to misplace it. Chapter 1, The Birth of Mass Fame, 1900 to 1918. The 20th century did not invent vanity, nor did it invent the human tendency to admire beautiful people behaving dramatically under artificial lighting. What it did invent, rather efficiently, was scale. With the advent of motion pictures, something remarkable occurred. Fame detached itself from geography. A stage actor, however celebrated, was still bound by physical presence. You had to be in the room in order to see him perform. His reputation traveled, but the performance did not. And film changed that equation entirely. Now a single performance could be replicated, distributed, and consumed by millions across vast distances. The same face, the same gestures, the same carefully curated persona could appear simultaneously in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and every modestly ambitious town in between. And so was born the modern celebrity. Figures like Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and Mary Pickford were not merely popular, they were ubiquitous, recognizable, mythologized. Their faces became fixtures of public consciousness in a way no prior generation of performers had ever achieved. And with that ubiquity came something new: influence. Now, to be clear, this influence did not immediately translate into political authority. The public still understood, at least instinctively, that the ability to fall down a flight of stairs in a comically satisfying manner did not confer expertise in matters of foreign policy. But it did make celebrities useful. Really quite useful indeed, because when the United States entered the First World War, the government discovered that these newly minted mass figures possessed a rare and valuable commodity: the public's attention. And attention properly harnessed can be converted into compliance. Thus began the era of the war bond tour. Chaplin, Fairbanks, Pickford, these were not political thinkers, nor were they treated as such, nor did they pretend to be. They were something far more practical. They were amplifiers, human billboards with charisma, familiar faces deployed in service of a national objective. They did not set policy. They didn't even critique policy. They did not hold press conferences to explain what the president was getting wrong. They stood on stages, smiled for crowds, and encouraged citizens to support the war effort. And it worked. Spectacularly well did it work. In fact, this is the crucial distinction of the era. Celebrities were not yet participants in political discourse. They were instruments of it. They borrowed authority from the state. They did not claim authority over it. No one mistook Woodrow Wilson for an understudy to Charlie Chaplin, even if the characterization was more fitting than either man might have preferred. The hierarchy remained intact. Fame had expanded, but authority had not. The seed, however, had been planted, because once a society becomes accustomed to seeing entertainers adjacent to power, even in a supporting role, it becomes only a matter of time before someone decides that adjacency ought to be upgraded to entitlement. And when that happens, the story begins to get rather interesting. Chapter 2, Patriotic Pageantry, 1919 to 1945. If the First World War introduced the idea that celebrities could be useful, the interwar period and the Second World War refined that concept into a full-fledged operating system. Hollywood, having discovered that fame could be mass-produced, spent the 1920s and 30s industrializing it. The studio system didn't just create actors, it manufactured personas. Carefully managed, relentlessly marketed, and polished to a mirror sheen, these figures became fixtures of American life. People didn't just watch movies, they followed movie stars. And yet, despite this exponential increase in visibility, there remained a clear, almost unspoken understanding that these people were not leaders, they were representatives. When the United States entered World War II, the relationship between celebrity and state reached its most symbiotic and most disciplined form. Actors enlisted, athletes enlisted, entire careers were paused or permanently altered in service of the war effort. Jimmy Stewart flew combat missions. Clark Gable traded red carpets for flight suits. Others who were less suited or less qualified for military life contributed in different ways, appearing in training films, morale-boosting shorts, and War Department productions designed to inform, to persuade, and occasionally to terrify. And then there was the USO circuit. Entertainers traveled to bases and to front lines, performing for troops in conditions that ranged from quaintly rustic to actively being shelled. Bob Hope became the unofficial patron saint of this endeavor, delivering jokes to soldiers who were very much in need of them, often within uncomfortable proximity to live artillery. This was celebrity activism, if one insists on using the term, but note its defining characteristics. It was unified, it was deferential, and it was entirely subordinate to national leadership. No one in Hollywood is holding press conferences to explain how Franklin D. Roosevelt ought to be prosecuting the war. There were no impassioned monologues from leading men about alternative strategies for the Pacific Theater, no actresses issuing statements about the moral ambiguities of the Lend-Lease program. The celebrity's role was not to shape policy, it was to support it, and, crucially, to embody it. They served as living proof that the war effort transcended class and profession, that everyone from factory workers to film stars was pulling in the same direction for the same cause. It is difficult to overstate how different this is from the modern conception of celebrity activism. There was no expectation that fame conferred independent moral authority. There was no performative outrage cycle. There was no sense that the actor, by virtue of being widely recognized, possessed a unique insight into matters of geopolitics. There was instead a kind of disciplined patriotism, one that understood both the power and the limits of public influence. Celebrities were at their most powerful when they stayed in their lane, and for a time, they managed to do that. But peace, as it so often does, would complicate matters. Because once the existential clarity of wartime fades, people begin to look around for new sources of meaning, new voices to follow, and new figures to elevate. And increasingly, those figures would come not from government or industry, but from the silver screen. Chapter 3, The Cold War Tightrope, 1945 to 1960. If the war years represented peak discipline, the early Cold War years were about balance, delicate, occasionally awkward, and always, always under surveillance. Hollywood emerged from World War II at the absolute height of its cultural power. The studio system was still intact. Movie stars were national icons, and American films were one of the country's most effective exports. But there was a catch. In the emerging ideological struggle with the Soviet Union, culture itself became a battleground. And that meant celebrities were no longer just entertainers, they were symbols, which is a polite way of saying everyone was watching them very, very closely. In the late 1940s and 50s saw the rise of anti-communist scrutiny, most notably through the activities of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Hollywood found itself under a microscope, with writers, directors, and actors being called to testify about their political affiliations, their acquaintances, and in some cases, what they had for breakfast in 1937. Careers were made, unmade, and occasionally incinerated. The result was not a surge in bold political expression, but quite the opposite. Caution. Extreme caution. Studios became risk-averse. Stars became guarded. Public political statements, when they occurred, were carefully calibrated to avoid alienating audiences or attracting the wrong kind of attention from Washington. This is the era where celebrity activism exists, but mostly in a low-volume, heavily filtered form. You might support a broadly popular cause. You might participate in a charity drive. You might, if you were feeling particularly adventurous, express a sentiment that could be described as patriotic, but with a few adjectives. What you did not do was position yourself as an independent political authority, because the system, both governmental and industrial, was designed to discourage exactly that sort of thing. At the same time, however, something subtle was happening beneath the surface. Television was arriving, and along with it came a new kind of intimacy. Audiences no longer saw celebrities only on the big screen in carefully curated performances. They saw them in interviews, on variety shows, in their living rooms. The distance between star and spectator began to shrink, which raised a dangerous and tantalizing possibility. If people felt like they knew these figures, mightn't they start caring what they thought? For now, the answer remained mostly Not really. But the conditions were assuredly being set, because once the wall between celebrity and audience starts to come down, it does not politely rebuild itself. More often than not, it collapses. And in the 1960s, it would do so with great gusto. Chapter 4, Sinatra, Camelot, and the First Breach, 1960 to 68. Every historical shift has its symbolic moment, the point at which something changes just enough that in retrospect you can say, yup, that is exactly where the dam started to crack. For celebrity activism in America, one of those moments arrives in 1960 when Frank Sinatra throws his considerable weight behind the candidacy of John F. Kennedy. Now, on its face, this doesn't seem particularly revolutionary. Celebrities had supported political causes before. They had participated in war efforts, endorsed broadly popular initiatives, and lent their faces to national campaigns. But this was a different sort of thing. This was personal. Sinatra didn't just quietly support Kennedy. He actively campaigned for him. He organized events. He rallied other entertainers to the cause. He even reworked his own music, famously adapting High Hopes into a Kennedy campaign jingle. This was not patriotic pageantry. This was political partnership. And it mattered, not just because of the star power involved, but because of what it represented socially. In addition to being a celebrity endorsement, this was also an exercise in coalition building. An Italian-American icon aligning himself with an Irish-American candidate at a time when ethnic identity still carried significant political weight. Hollywood and politics were no longer merely adjacent. They were beginning to intertwine. The Kennedy era, often romanticized as Camelot, further blurred the lines. The White House itself became to some extent, a stage. Cultural figures mingled with political ones. Glamour and governance shared the same room, occasionally the same cocktail party. And the public noticed. The idea that a celebrity might not only support a candidate, but also help shape the narrative around that candidate began to take root. But, and this is crucial, the boundaries still existed. Sinatra was influential, yes, certainly very visible, but he was not presumed to be any sort of policy expert. He was not delivering lectures on fiscal policy or foreign affairs. His role was amplification and not authorship. He helped to sell a product. He did not claim to be the one who designed it. That distinction would not survive the decade, because the 1960s, as a general rule, were not particularly interested in distinctions, boundaries, or moderation. They were interested in upheaval. And once the broader culture began to radicalize, politically, socially, and culturally, Hollywood would not remain on the sidelines for long. It would, with increasing enthusiasm, take the field. Chapter 5, Megaphones and Movements, 1968 to 1980. And now we arrive at the moment where everything changes. The late 1960s and 70s represent the full emergence of the celebrity as a political actor, not merely a supporter, not merely a symbol, but an active participant in the ideological battles of the day. If Sinatra had cracked the door open, this era kicked it off its hinges. The backdrop, of course, is a chaotic one. The Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, assassinations, protests, cultural revolutions that made previous generations look like they had been sleepwalking through history. And in this environment, neutrality became unfashionable. Silence, in some circles, became indistinguishable from complicity. Enter the celebrity megaphone. Actors, musicians, and public figures began speaking out, not just in support of broadly agreeable causes, but on specific, contentious, and deeply polarizing issues. Anti-war activism, in particular, became a defining feature of the era, with prominent entertainers lending their voices to protest movements that were as visible as they were controversial. Unlike the wartime unity of the 1940s, this was not a case of celebrities reinforcing national consensus. This was celebrities challenging that consensus. And for the first time, large segments of the public began to accept, sometimes even to expect, that entertainers would have political opinions that were worth hearing. The reasons are not entirely mysterious. By this point, the studio system had been weakened. Stars had more autonomy. The rise of New Hollywood brought a generation of filmmakers and actors who saw themselves not just as entertainers, but as artists, and increasingly, as commentators on the society. Meanwhile, television had matured into a dominant medium, further collapsing the distance between public figures and the audience. Interviews became more candid. Appearances became more frequent. The sense that celebrities were accessible, relatable, and therefore credible continued to grow. And here is the critical turning point. The public didn't just tolerate celebrity political expression, they began to reward it. Activism could enhance a star's image within certain demographics. It could signal authenticity, conviction, moral seriousness. It could, in the right circles, elevate an entertainer from mere performer to cultural figure of consequence. Of course, it could also alienate audiences. But for the first time, enough celebrities were willing to accept that trade-off. The idea that one might risk commercial appeal in order to take a political stand, this would have been unthinkable in the tightly controlled studio era, but now it was becoming a badge of honor. And with that shift, the final barrier begins to erode. Because once celebrities are seen not just as entertainers, but as morally credible voices, it is only a matter of time before some of them start to believe it. Chapter 6, The Age of Selective Restraint, 1980 to 2000. If the 1970s were about discovery, celebrities realizing they could speak politically, the 80s and 90s were about calibration, because it turns out there is a slight downside to loudly announcing that half of your audience is wrong about everything and they're terrible people. Namely, you still need those people to buy freaking movie tickets. Perhaps Michael Jordan summed it up best when he famously remarked, "Republicans buy sneakers too, you know." This period represents a kind of uneasy equilibrium. Celebrities engaged in political activity, yes, but often with an eye toward maintaining their broad appeal. Causes were chosen very carefully. Messaging was softened. The sharpest edges were sanded down into something more palatable, more universal. You might advocate for world hunger relief. You might support environmental awareness. You might appear at a benefit concert or a televised fundraiser. What you generally did not do, at least not as a matter of routine, was to go on a public tirade against half of the people in the country. Even during politically charged moments, there remained a sense, however faint, that alienating a large swath of the audience was bad business. And then, of course, there were the exceptions, because history, in its infinite sense of humor, decided that the first two men to successfully vault from celebrity into the presidency would not be left-leaning cultural critics, but rather conservative Republicans. Enter Ronald Reagan, a former actor who not only participated in politics, but mastered it, demonstrating that celebrity, when paired with communication skill and ideological clarity, could translate into actual electoral power. Hollywood, broadly speaking, did not enjoy this development. And then some years later, because lightning occasionally does strike the same place twice, we would get Donald Trump, a figure whose celebrity status came from a different medium, but whose trajectory reinforced the same unsettling reality, that fame could be converted into political authority, not advisory influence, not symbolic relevance, but actual bona fide authority. This produced a kind of cognitive dissonance within the entertainment establishment. The industry was comfortable with celebrities commenting on politics. It was far less comfortable with them winning in politics, particularly when they did their winning from the wrong side of the ideological aisle. And yet, for most of this era, the overall tone remained relatively measured. Celebrities endorsed candidates, they participated in campaigns, they occasionally spoke out on contentious issues, but they still operated within a framework that acknowledged a basic truth. The audience was not monolithic, and antagonizing half or more of it came with certain consequences. That understanding would not survive the next phase. Chapter 7, The Internet, the Algorithm, and the Collapse of Incentives, 2000 to 2016. And now we introduce the accelerant. The early 21st century did not invent celebrity activism, but it fundamentally rewired its incentive structure. So first enter the internet, and more specifically, enter social media. For the first time in human history, celebrities were no longer dependent on studios, networks, or publicists to communicate with their audience. They could speak directly, instantly, and without any filtration to millions of people, which sounds in theory like a democratizing miracle. In practice, it turns out to be a bit more like handing a megaphone to a chimpanzee. Platforms rewarded engagement, engagement rewarded outrage, outrage rewarded visibility. And visibility, as it turns out, is the oxygen of celebrity. The old constraints, the need to maintain broad appeal, the fear of alienating ticket buyers began to erode because the business model itself was changing profoundly. Attention became the currency. And nothing generates attention quite like a strongly worded opinion. Celebrities began to discover that taking firm, highly visible stances on political and social issues could dramatically increase their relevance in this new digital ecosystem. Likes, shares, retweets, these became the new applause. Nuance, meanwhile, was less, shall we say, algorithmically efficient. There is also the era where activism becomes increasingly performative, not necessarily insincere, but optimized for visibility rather than persuasion. Statements are crafted not to convince opponents, but to signal alignment to allies. I believe in current thing becomes less of a punchline and more of a business model. And here is the key shift. The downside risk of alienating part of your audience diminishes if your core audience becomes more ideologically homogenous. Entertainment consumption fragments, audiences self-sort. Entire industries begin catering to specific demographics rather than to the mythical everyone, which means a celebrity no longer needs to appeal to the entire country. They just need to dominate their little corner of it. And in that environment, there is less and less incentive to moderate, to hedge, or to restrain oneself. The system begins to reward certainty over curiosity, assertion over inquiry, volume over thought. By the mid-2010s, the transformation is nearly complete. All that remains is for someone to light the match. Chapter 8, The Age of Moral Exhibitionism, 2016 to the present. And light it they sure did. The post-2016 era represents the full maturation, if that's the word we're going to use, of celebrity activism as a constant, performative, and often aggressively partisan presence in public life. The guardrails are gone, the incentives are clear, and the volume knob is permanently set to 11, maybe 12, maybe 13. In this environment, a celebrity's public identity is no longer defined solely or even primarily by their professional output. Increasingly, it is defined by their political posture. Not just what they believe, but how loudly, how frequently, and how emphatically they declare it. Social media have collapsed the distance between thought and publication. Every reaction can be broadcast instantly. Every event demands a statement. Silence is interpreted as complicity, hesitation as weakness. And so the system rewards those who are most willing to participate in the ritual of declaring allegiance, denouncing the opposition, lather, rinse, repeat. This is where we might arrive at what could be called the moral purity Olympics, in which public figures compete, implicitly or otherwise, to demonstrate their alignment with the prevailing sentiments of their chosen audience. And yes, this often includes the ritual denunciation of figures like Donald Trump, not merely as a political opponent, but as a kind of symbolic villain totem pole whose condemnation serves as a shorthand for broader moral positioning. Now, to be clear, celebrities are citizens. They are entitled to their opinions. They are perfectly free to express them. The question is not whether they can speak. It is whether the system now encourages them to speak well. And here, the results are decidedly mixed, because what we frequently observe is not informed advocacy, but confident generalization, not careful reasoning, but emotional assertion. Complex issues reduced to slogans that fit comfortably within a character limit, and perhaps most notably, an unmistakable sense of unwarranted self-importance. The assumption that visibility equates to insight, that recognition confers authority, that being listened to frequently is the same thing as being worth listening to. It is, in many ways, the logical endpoint of a century-long evolution, from disreputable outsiders to patriotic participants to cautious endorsers to full-time commentators and finally, self-appointed moral arbiters of the national consciousness. And like all such evolutions, it tells us at least as much about the audience as it does about the performers, because none of this really works unless people are willing to take it seriously. Epilogue: the applause and the authority. And so here we are, a world in which actors and singers, people whose professional expertise lies in memorizing lines and hitting marks, are routinely treated as though they possess unique insight into governance, economics, foreign policy, and indeed the general condition of mankind, which is not to say they are incapable of insight, only that their profession does not inherently provide it. What has changed over the course of this long and winding journey is not the intelligence of celebrities, although, let's face it, they are almost certainly far more ignorant and credulous than they used to be. It is rather the perception of their authority. Once upon a time, fame was understood as a kind of spectacle, entertaining, impressive, but ultimately separate from the serious business of running a country. But then it became useful. Then it became influential. Then it became persuasive. And finally, in some quarters, it became authoritative. But authority, real authority, has traditionally been rooted in knowledge, experience, and accountability. Things that are not automatically conferred by a successful filmography or a platinum record. The modern celebrity activist exists in a peculiar space, enormously visible, widely heard, but not meaningful, accountable for being wrong. And in that environment, confidence flourishes, certainty abounds, and humility tends to wander off in search of better working conditions. So by all means, let the celebrities speak. Let them advocate, endorse, opine, and occasionally embarrass themselves in front of millions. That, after all, is their right. But perhaps, just perhaps, we might consider returning to a slightly older and sturdier standard. That being famous does not make you wise. That being visible does not make you correct. And that ability to deliver a convincing performance is not the same thing as telling the truth. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we close the book on this week's field guide, having traced the arc from disrepute to dominance, from silence to sermon, from the stage to the soapbox. Thank you, as always, for your kind attention, and I now duly transmit you into the custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
You're muted.
Yeah, I figured that part. I forgot it doesn't unmute anymore. All right, we're going to pretend like none of that ever happened. We're going to go right back from the top. And dude, don't mess with me. I'll make you center of the show. All right, boom, bomb, bam. Good. It didn't work either. Fuck. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Tonight, I have it on good authority that woke is not dead. It is merely hibernating. So saith the Rageaholic. We also have an interesting conundrum. What happens when all the men in society disappear? Well, may have happened once before, and I brought a video to look at it. But before we get there, I want to know what the world spawned all of that, dude. I mean, celebrity influence on that. I got something for that, dude. Like, I've been thinking on it. Let's do this. Bam. Bam. Now, wait, I don't like where that's at. Let's move it. I can move it. We're going to put it somewhere different. Oh, that's no better. Put it up here. Not so great. Oh, that's just fucking weird.
Yeah, it's just fucking weird.
Huh. Anyway, we're going to give it a few minutes, see whether or not anybody gives a shit. We're going to, 1 for no, 2 for yes, and 3, I do not vote in polls, proving you a hypocrite. We're going to let it roll. We're going to give it a few minutes. If anybody votes for it, fine. If they don't, we'll never do it again. How's that?
Are we asking the right question though? Is it should they
not.
should they be allowed, or should anybody give a damn? But it doesn't matter. Let's just interpret the question however you like.
Right. Well, I don't think anyone should give a damn about what an actor says. I mean, they are literally paid to lie. So why would you care?
Well, yes, and it remains a fact that profession, as I mentioned in the monologue, used to be considered by most people fairly highly disreputable. It was, just a little tiny station above being a prostitute. There used to be, whether rightly or wrongly, there used to be a widespread distrust of people who made their livings at night, which includes prostitutes and actors. So they kind of get lumped into the same sort of little box where nobody wants to trust them all that much or be around them all that much. And especially here in the United States, where an actor assassinated our favorite president. So they had an even more dismal reputation after that than they did elsewhere. And that's, kind of a peculiar phenomenon that happened in this country, but it did exist elsewhere always. I mean, that back into the mists of time immemorial, that stereotype existed about people who were professional theater types, whatever you want to call them.
Theater types, musicians, traveling salesmen, these people, used car salesmen, these all get the same snake oil salesman, greasy BS. And yeah, okay. So this raises another question, though, doesn't it? What is the significance of someone who is transferring from an acting or musician's career into a political career, and what ramifications does that have on both?
I think the success of Ronald Reagan completely remade politics. I think
Agreed.
it would be a completely different thing today if Reagan had never come along and remade it, because the model used to be that, that the politician was supposed to do political stuff. He was supposed to be good at policy, good at management, good at the skills that we traditionally associate with running a large organization like a national government. To the extent that they had to be public figures, had to be put on film, had to be on the radio, had to speak in public. You tried to manage that well enough so they just wouldn't do themselves any harm or embarrass themselves. But along comes Reagan, like a bolt out of the blue, and that's the best part of his game. That's his wheelhouse. That's the stuff where he can absolutely own everybody else. And from that point forward, the whole idiom of politics became a performative idiom, where your on-camera skills and your speaking skills and your rhetorical skills matter so much more than the policy things that everybody used to care about before. And it is such a stark and dramatic transition that I don't think we have fully appreciated the extent of, still from this short remove of only 40, 50 years.
Well, I mean, I kind of see Ronald Reagan's rise in California as sort of a pre-trimmer of what later became internet fame, because part of the reason he was able to become president was the household quality of his name. The fact that every woman in every household everywhere who had ever seen a Ronald Reagan flick said, "That is a damn fine man." And you couldn't change their mind on it. That man could have walked out on Times Square, shot someone in between the eyes, and probably would have walked, because at least half the jurors would have been little old ladies who loved him.
Right. And he enters the political arena having already accumulated a lot of public trust in his previous endeavors, and not just that he did some low budget movies that people liked pretty well, but also, crucially, his value as a commercial pitchman and TV commercial endorser guy. Reagan was probably in the early 60s one of the most popular commercial pitchmen on your television. Even if he wasn't starring in a show on your television, he was in probably one out of every 3 commercials. Chesterfield cigarettes and right. I forget the other products that he was a pitchman for, but that was one of the big ones. And you couldn't watch TV for an evening without seeing Ronald Reagan at least half a dozen times, and that counts for something.
It has to.
And if it
definitely
didn't,
counts for something.
He wouldn't have ascended to the heights that he ascended to. It absolutely does account for a lot. And I don't think anybody saw that coming. And in many ways, we are still learning to adjust to it.
Right. It's rare, and I think, to come across a celebrity a politician who's a celebrity first, but it is less rare now than it once was. Although I wonder if a certain amount of celebrity didn't always or usually start as the springboard for political careers. I mean, there's at least a dozen cases of it, not necessarily as high an echelon as the presidency, but, local politics are chock full of people who used to be performers of some type.
Right, particularly people who used to be on the local news and they run for the local seat in Congress or the local mayoralty or some office like that. That's become fairly common, fairly ubiquitous. But
I got one for you.
Go for it.
And I hate to cut you off, but this was
no.
Do you remember the case of the sheriff that got shot by one of the deputies or something? The judge that was shot by the sheriff or the deputy or whatever. Just walked into his chambers and popped 2 caps in his ass because I think it was. Hold on, let me look it up. I can't remember. I bet just JP knows.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Anyway, the man that killed the judge in that case, when he got out of jail for his temporary insanity plea or whatever, ran for sheriff, apparently still under indictment, and won. So like, and the story behind all of that, and I'm coating this with a whole bunch of allegedly like peanut butter and whatnot, was that this particular individual had been in text conversations and Snapchat conversations with Homeboy's daughter. And I don't know as to the age of the daughter. It's just never mentioned, but it makes me wonder if perhaps that might be something I should look up, right? And that being said, this is very much like that, what was the name of that dude that, they did a movie, Dwayne Johnson did the player, Walking Tall, right? Isn't that name of the movie?
Yeah. I know the movie, but I haven't seen it.
That story, the story that movie is based on, is far more interesting than the movies that were made off of it. If you go check out the details in those stories, Homeboy toted home a real major ass whooping. Got stomped down by like all the bad guys in town and half the police department. And he crawled home, nursed himself back to health, and then came back in and completely blew the lid off of absolutely everything by basically calling the FBI and saying, "Yeah, I'll walk right into the middle of it. I'll be the bug. I'll be the gopher. I'll do all the stuff." And he did. He did all the stuff, and he tore a corrupt city government apart brick by brick and forced legitimate elections to take place.
I think I just remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I just remembered the sheriff's name. I think it's Sheriff Buford Pusser.
Buford,
look it up.
Yeah, Purser or Pusser, I can't remember.
Imagine having a name like Buford Pusser.
Dude, I mean, it's like having a name like Sue, because you gonna be a badass by the time you walk away from that ass whooping you take it at every single gathering of men ever. Right? That's character building for sure. I wonder if his dad stuck around.
McNairy County, Tennessee. Sheriff from 64 to 70 and Constable of Adamsville from 70 to 72. His time in office inspired several books, songs, and movies, most notably Walking Tall. He was also a wrestler known as Buford the Bull.
There you go.
More you know.
Right? And knowing is some part of the battle I haven't determined yet.
And I guess that gives him some kind of a weird connection with The Rock, if The Rock portrayed him in the movie.
Sure. You ever tell you my little head canon theory that that actors take on the powers of the characters they play? And this is why Keanu Reeves is just an absolute unit.
Then why can't Tom Holland climb up the side of a building?
He can't. He just doesn't.
Okay. I got you. Gotta keep it on the down low, just like an actual real life superhero would.
It's just like Keanu Reeves can fly, but he still owns a jet.
The Rock is his spirit animal. Love it.
That's beautiful, bud.
Oh.
Okay, so fame and politics and fame. These things seem to be inextricably woven together in what the concept of political theater, in Jungian psychology. Or are we talking about something more based than that and just orator's spoken word?
I think we could refer safely to all politics as political theater at this point. Mainly because of I hate to blame the whole thing on Reagan, but there's really no way around the fact that is when the whole thing became performative, and he was so many years ahead of everybody else that it was a process of everyone else trying to catch up to where he was. And I think it's probably not an accident that the only two people who have ever ascended from the celebrity class to the presidency of the United States are not just conservatives, but they also came out of that celebrity ecosystem and had a lot of popularity that was built in. People forget today how popular Donald Trump was up until the day he became a Republican presidential candidate. Everybody used to love Trump. So Some people for different reasons than others, but very few people would never hear anybody say, "Oh God, I hate Donald Trump." Everybody either liked him for something or they were amused by him, because obviously they're amused by him. He has an entire persona that is calculated to be slightly ridiculous and slightly absurd. It's the reason why he still wears the same suit and tie and has the same hair that he had in 1985. That is all carefully calculated. You say the name Donald Trump, everybody knows not just exactly who you're talking about, but they can actually, visualize the silhouette of what Donald Trump looks like. And it's not any different today than it was back in the 80s when our man Reagan was president. And that a personal brand like that is so identifiable and so ingrained in the culture is the most valuable political thing you can ever have, far beyond any actual policy positions or any actual administrative skills you possess, I would submit.
Right. Mainly, it seems to be whether or not your central messaging is on point for the voter base that you're seeking. So if you're doing the Democrat thing, you kind of have to do the identity politics and reparations dance and racism dance. But if you're doing Republican stuff, you've got to be like Second Amendment and constitutionalist and all of that.
God, family, country,
Trump, God, family, country, exactly. And Trump doesn't really do that super well. He's more of the New York liberal.
Yep.
Like, I would almost argue he's closer to center of the road than most of the MAGA people out there.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. I don't know whether I believe or don't believe the idea, which I've heard. It's been out there for a while, like that when Trump entered politics, that he wasn't. I mean, it was widely known that he's never been particularly religious, but some people say now that he actually has developed more of an affinity with Christian belief than he ever possessed before he became a Republican, candidate for office. And it's a fascinating possibility, and maybe I would trend to start thinking in that direction too if I had survived an assassination attempt that narrowly as he did, because that's got to create some pretty wild thoughts in your head, I would think. I don't want to find out, but when it's that fractions of an inch and one little tiny head movement right at the end, I mean, that has got to make you think some pretty serious shit afterward.
I think so too. Let's see. Okay, so that didn't do it. How do I end the poll? I can move it and do stuff.
That's a good question.
I can hide it.
There it is.
No, it's not gone. It's still there.
Oh.
I can even turn it back on if people want to vote 1, 2, or 3 right quick. It'll register backstage and I can see it because it's still right there. Right. But I don't know how to end the poll. Do I hit a new poll? No, that gives me a second poll. Now I don't know how to. Let's cancel that. Oh, I remember now. But it doesn't post any results. Okay, that's a weird widget. I'll play with that later. We'll figure it out.
Does it maybe just stay active until the end of the broadcast?
That's probably what it is. But I mean, you've got the ability to do like 4 polls at a time, I think, and that would be kind of busy on the screen. So
definitely.
What's up, Just JP? Welcome in. Barbie Sasquatch, good to see you. Piker Broadcasting Service. We had a question for you while you were doing your intro monologue. What was it? What kind of jersey is that?
Channel logo.
Yeah, but I mean the jersey cut. Is that hockey? Is that rugby? Is that what is that?
Yes. Hockey.
Hockey. That's what I thought. But I didn't want to answer without you. Like Mr. Chris Schneider. Chris. I don't know. Anyway, he wanted to know what kind of jersey you were wearing, and it is a hockey jersey, sir.
That was an easy question.
We like them easy, the same way I like my women.
We do.
Never ever told you how I like my women?
I heard Eric Swalwell likes his women that way, too.
I like my women just like I like my coffee, hot, sweet, and creamy.
Was there any chance that Swalwell was going to escape this program without me mentioning his name? No, there was not.
He's even in the ticker down here because his local constituents are trying to convince him not to run or to step down from his position.
Oh, he's finished, dude. And
Yeah, he's so screwed.
What an incredible miscalculation on his part. Because I don't know what kind of a political operator he thinks he is, but let's just talk about some facts. Fact number one: if you are that kind of man who behaves in a sexually boorish fashion on the regular, who basically tries to bang every woman he's ever been alone in a room with, that's the type it seems like we're dealing with here. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I have a pretty strong inclination that that's the
I kind of feel targeted.
that's the type we're dealing with here. But dude, why did you think you got to be upwardly mobile? Why did you think you get to run for governor? Because you know what? None of this shit is a secret. Your behavior is not a secret. The people in your own party, they've known about this for a long time. Nothing is secret in Washington. You can't behave that way to that extent for that long without people knowing about it, especially not in a town like Washington. But if that dude would have been content to know where his ceiling is, to know that his ceiling is dim-witted backbench member of Congress who gets sent out to do the very unimportant cable news hits that the actual party leaders can't be bothered with. If you were willing to stay in your lane and recognize where your ceiling is, they would have kept covering for you forever. You could have kept this job until you were 80, 85, 90 years old. You could have sexually predated every single woman you wanted to. They would have kept covering for you, but you tried to be upwardly mobile, and that's not your lane. And now they have to destroy you because now they view you as an inconvenience. Now they see you splitting the vote. They know you're not actually going to be the governor, but they see you there splitting the vote, actually creating the specter of the Republicans actually taking the California State House. And we can't allow that. We got to chuck you out the window now. And let's remember also what kind of a precedent the Democrats established for themselves in terms of these types of allegations of sexual malfeasance when they defenestrated Al Franken for pretending to cup a woman's boob. Yeah.
Right.
Painted yourself into a bit of a corner there, guys. All I'm saying.
So, this kind of dovetails pretty nicely into my whole woke discussion because essentially the entire woke movement was driven almost entirely by online and celebrity endorsement concepts. This may have been, and also college campus and celebrity endorsements on that side too.
Definitely. Well, yeah, they've built a very effective ecosystem for themselves, and that's, it has a lot of tentacles that reach into a lot of places and a lot of things.
No, it's just one very effective method, and I have two letters for it. It's called HR.
Mm-hmm.
And you find an HR department in every single corporation, company, or mom and pop shop that's got more than 6 employees. You have an HR department, and their job is basically to ruin the company.
Exactly, and that is why capturing the colleges and the universities was such an important part of the project, because once you have turned the colleges and universities into, woke leftist madrasas, then all the graduates you churn out of those colleges and universities, you can send them out like little time bombs into every HR department in every corporate boardroom in the country, and just wait for them to go off. And you're right. The ultimate objective is destabilization and destruction of existing institutions by any means necessary, but to no particular end, because people who are motivated by the desire to destroy don't really think about what comes after. And that's really where we are with the, if you want to call it, the mainstream of American leftist thought at this point. They are so busy wanting to tear things down, they don't think for a moment what kind of world they want to live in afterward. And it's a bit of a problem, and it winds up with half the people in the country being fucking nihilists, and it's not a good way to live.
Well, you end up with half the people worried about only what comes after, and the other half of the people worried about destroying what we have here now, so that they can experience what comes after. And in almost every case, it's very similar to the Rhodesian Revolution, the South African Revolution.
Well, yeah, and Zimbabwe. Oh, you already
Zimbabwe?
said Rhodesia, so never mind. You already said Rhodesia.
Yeah, but I mean, you can make the argument that it was the Zimbabwe Revolution.
But yeah, but it arises from the same attitude that
right.
everything that exists here currently is inherently evil and irredeemable. So it has to be destroyed, and the destruction is the only thing that matters. And then you look up after you've destroyed everything, and oh man, all of our domestic food production is gone. How the hell did that happen? Now we're all going to starve, but at least we achieved our ideological aims, right? So let's all high five each other as we become cannibals, I guess.
Basically, I mean, ask President Barbecue what to do. So we have Mr. Rageaholic over here, and the title of this video is "Woke Media Isn't Dead, It's Hibernating." And I was having thoughts very similar to what he expresses here 8 or 9 months ago when the whole black fatigue concept rolled through, and I realized it's not black fatigue, it's victimhood fatigue. It's a fatigue that applies to every possible aspect of that entire labeling, accepting labels. All of that stuff is completely beyond the pale, right? So that's what we're actually talking about. Black fatigue just happens to be the most vocal and most forward part of it, and the place it's most visible. But I think it's only the beginning. You're already seeing it trickle down into other parts of like films and movies and books and stuff, where you have protagonists that are completely anti that, and they're not necessarily evil bigots. Or even if they are, it's okay.
And it's important to make that distinction, and I'm glad you made it, because the fatigue that we're talking about is a multifaceted fatigue that has a lot of different ingredients, and you can't really boil it down to the most convenient racial label, as people often try to do with many things, because our country loves nothing more than a fake racism controversy. But yes, the fatigue has much more to do, I would submit, with the constant subdivision of the populace into ever smaller and more specialized grievance groups with an aim toward, we know what the aim is. The aim is you each election cycle, you just cobble together your little grievance groups into an equation that adds up to winning the election, and whatever societal decay arises from it, who gives a shit? We won the election. We're in power. We don't care if people suffer now. We don't care if everything runs terribly now, because power is the only thing that matters.
Right. So like I said at the beginning, woke isn't dead, it's merely hibernating. They're licking their wounds. They're all backstage at all of the production companies with their head a little lower than they were in 2015, and they're not making a big stink about absolutely everything. And they're regrouping, reloading, and I think Mr. Rageaholic over here says it probably better than I can. So let's do the thing.
Of woke films flopping like Kathy Bates on a trampoline and Disney killing more childhoods than Stevie Nicks' uterus, it's become oh so en vogue to describe the ESG entertainment contagion as officially contained. And indeed, at a glance, it's certainly no longer in ascent. Following the election, video game publisher Ubisoft outright shit-canned a crapload of commie nonsense, ironically after being effectively purchased by an agent of the CCP. On the filmic front, WB and Paramount are touching...
Yes. You see how much the pushback works, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
Look at Supergirl right now, the new Supergirl flick. Before any of that ever surfaced and started doing anything, the chick that was playing the main character came out and mentioned this really strange thing to say if you haven't had any actual pushback on anything you've done. I mean, she called a little bit of smoke from the Game of Thrones thing. Isn't that the same chick?
Yeah, Millie Alcock.
Right. And so she had like this pre astroturfing statement about how manosphere men tend to have I can't remember what the quote was, but she said something about men being a problem in the modern ecospace because, you know, they have a tendency of brigading people, and it was right before they released the first what is it? A series? I think it's a series. Why do they keep redoing Supergirl?
I think
never
it's just
does
a
well.
movie.
Is it a
Helen
movie?
Slater, the Helen Slater 1984 Supergirl movie was such an absolute masterpiece. I can't see why you would ever want to remake that. Peter O'Toole, what a great way to bolster his reputation to us by appearing in that piece of shit. My God, if I could go back in time and talk Peter O'Toole into not doing that picture, I would do it. I would use my one-time travel trip just to do that, just because. Don't you know how uncomfortable it makes you feel when you see great actors appearing in complete pieces of shit? Robert De Niro, recent period Robert De Niro can tell you a lot about that, but that's the same thing that Peter O'Toole did when he took the big fat check to be in that god-awful, possibly the worst movie ever made, Supergirl picture. I don't know. If somebody's ever seen a worse movie than that, tell me in the chat what it is, and I will watch it.
Black Devil Doll from Hell. Slaughterhouse. Have you ever seen any of the Sleepaway Camp series? I mean, there's like 14 right there.
Have you seen Supergirl in 1984?
I'm almost positive I have, but I say we both watch it this week, come back and just badmouth the living shit out of it next week. Let's do that. I may have to buy the damn thing, but I'll do it.
And I think there's a non-zero chance that the new Supergirl flick is going to be worse than that one, probably for starkly different reasons. But that's the phenomenon you just mentioned is a thing that we are seeing more and more as the woke Hollywood period continues its extensive years-long death rattle.
Well, that's just it though. Not dead, just.
Right, but setting that aside, they are so dubious about the prospects for these films succeeding. This has popped up repeatedly with Disney's piece of shit remakes in recent years, where they actually have the star of the movie go out there and say the most obnoxious woke shit that they can in the hopes that the internet will get pissed off and that will produce more publicity for the picture than it would have had otherwise. It's a strategy that hasn't seemed to work out very well so far, but it looks like they are going to keep at it. This thing sounds exactly like that to me. I don't know if it does to you. It is an attempt to weave out of whole cloth a fake anti-woke controversy.
Right. And preemptively at that, right? To go ahead and say, all of these certain types of people are going to hate this because they hate everything. When in reality,
all of these incel right-wing neckbeard man babies are sure going to hate this movie, aren't you?
Right? Baiting. Literally baiting them into
Literally, yes, absolutely. Baiting them like catfish.
Like catfish.
Tips thanks to a decade's worth of movies making negative dollars, and the streaming front ain't exactly swooping in to save the day either. The Iranian Navy releases better trailers than Disney Plus at this point. And if the rumors about the new Iranian president are true, they have at least as many LGBT characters. And the resultant revenue very much reflects these facts, all of which was typified by the recent Oscars ceremony. You know, it used to be a mere misanthrope talking point to say the Oscars are the night when Hollywood pats itself on the back. But first off, after Weinstein, we know that's not the only place they're patting each other. And second off, compare the box office to even a few years ago. 2 decades back, they were making more money than an Adderall salesman at TwitchCon. Now the only time the theater is full is when the Romneys go out.
That's like more snow than Aspen, bro. That's more pounds than a maternity ward. Like, holy crap, bro. Jesus.
For movie night. Point being, what are these awards even for? Least empty theater? Seen the box office for Scream 7? More people have seen Nancy Guthrie over the last month. There was once a time when we'd endure your preening and preachifying because in amongst the proselytism you were cranking out Jurassic Park, The Godfather, or Star Wars, but then came the Troon Typhoon. In 2020, out flew an anorexic Elliot Page, fresh off a 7-year stretch at Auschwitz.
Wow. You want to talk about being an individual that completely torpedoed their own career. What was the name of the series that he was in where they blew up the moon? I can't remember the name of that. The something Academy, the Crow Academy, Raven Academy, Owl Academy. Fuck. Can't remember. I want to call it the Spider Chronicles, but not really.
the two movies of hers that concern me, since we have to get retroactively historical with this shit, are Super and Hard Candy. So let's just walk.
God, Hard Candy. Fuck.
Exactly. So what we've done here with Ellen Page, who wants to call herself Elliot now, and whatever, I guess that's her business, but she decides that she is swapping her gender, and then everybody in Hollywood has to go and edit the credits on all of her previous pictures so that it makes it look like it was actually a male playing these female characters. So the point I'm getting at, in the movie Super, in specific, where a still female Ellen Page rapes Rainn Wilson's character, there's no other word for it. It's rape. It's a male on female rape scene, but am I supposed to retroactively view that as a homosexual rape now? Because that makes me very confused. And Hard Candy, that's a story about gay pedophilia now? Is that where we are? Because they edited the credits on that one too. How am I supposed to feel about any of this? What is supposed to go through my head as I am watching these movies whose makers are trying to tell me that this actress is actually a dude, and I should view this entire arrangement completely differently than I have previously. That's a hell of a thing to put on an audience, I think.
The Umbrella Academy. That's the one I was thinking of. I loved the first season of the Umbrella Academy. But in the second season, in like the first episode, something happens and she disappears. And then when she comes back as a man, right? And all right, I don't care. I didn't care to begin with. They could have handled that in a single scene where it's like, okay, well, I'm a man now. Okay, fine, whatever. We move on and do the same fucking show we were doing before. But no, the rest of that became all about the entire wokarati concept, and that whole season went to shit in a bucket right out the gate. And then Juno. Dear God, Juno.
Oh my God. Yeah, Juno too. I mean, yes, exactly. How the fuck are we supposed to view that picture now? I mean, what the actual hell?
Rather large, salty grain of salt, perhaps.
So we now have to view that movie exactly the same way we used to view the movie where fucking Schwarzenegger has a baby, right? Because isn't it the same thing now?
Kinda, sorta, not really, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, the credits say this is a male actor that's having this baby, so might as well roll with it, I guess.
Okay, so apparently she was involved with ARC, the animated series. Homeless to Harvard. There's a bunch of stuff here I've never heard of.
And
wow.
It feels to me like it's almost inevitable that at some point within the next 5 years, you know, as the crest of the wave of the popularity of transgenderism continues to decline more and more and more, as it already is doing, that Ellen Page is going to not like the amount of attention she's getting anymore, she's not going to be getting the same amount of cultural cachet from her gender change that she got in the beginning. And I think in order to increase her public profile, she is inevitably going to untransition and announce that she's going back to being a chick. Because I think that's largely the reason she decided to become a dude in the first place. Because she saw her career fading, didn't like where it was at, wanted to jump on the big, you know, political virtue signaling train of the day, which at the time was transgenderism. And that would make her career do what she wanted it to do, and everyone would live happily ever after. And, you know, forgive me for being so dubious about her actual intentions, but that's what I really think. And shoot me, I guess, if I'm being insensitive.
Agreed.
It's by the look of it, replete with the headline, "I am fully who I am." I don't know about you folks, but I feel I'm not the authentic version of myself until a British Columbian butcher has sanded down my jaw, carved off my cans, and surgically installed soundproof egg crating on my abs. And inspired by her stunningly brave act of laying there in a hospital bed, the industry soon went from box office to box surgery. Camera negative Netflix reboots, Trantifa lady dicks on Sesame Street, Street, the indoctrinaire dicking may have softened slightly, but we're all still biting the pillow. You know, there's an age-old aphorism in Alcoholics Anonymous. No one will quit until they're ready. It's not addressed to the addict in question, but rather to their family and their friends, so as not to torture themselves with their inability to keep Uncle Ruckus from guzzling a tankard of turpentine every time they turn their backs. You can have more intervention than the Gaza Strip. Until Nick Nolte's ready to unfriend Jack Daniels, he ain't gonna stop doing figure eights on a San Diego sidewalk. And well, if wokeness is a narcotic, you tell me, do Hollywood seem perfectly apologetic and primed to put the crack pipe down?
I should warn you, tonight could get political, okay? And if that makes you uncomfortable, there's an alternate Oscars being hosted by Kid Rock. Yeah. It's at the Dave & Buster's down the street. A lot of tickets for that.
No to war and free Palestine.
I believe in current thing.
So, I got a question. I might be one of those old hick dopes what don't know nothing at all.
I believe in current thing. I believe in current thing.
So, I was looking at a map the other day. I looked everywhere. I couldn't find Palestine. So, how can you free something that doesn't exist? That's my question.
Yep.
Is that a thing?
Well, and if it did exist, it would be right there. It would be tinier than that little dot that signifies Tripoli.
Right? It's inside the Tripoli dot.
Actually, there is a dot for Gaza, but no
Okay.
Palestine.
I don't see it. But anyway, okay. Yeah. Good talk.
There's only 8% of films that were made by women.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a 7-year low.
Mm.
I mean, what do you think that says?
I'm thinking about whether to say this.
Say it.
I think that it's fine. Like when we make little movies, cute, you know, or like go make your little movie. It starts to get dangerous when women have their hands on a lot of money. You know what you're saying? You're saying it's a tiny percentage, but look at how many of those movies were movies that made an impact. Like if you've had your mouth shut for so long, almost like a geyser, like having your hand on something. Well, when it bursts, it's going to come out really powerfully.
It
She wants
comes
to
out
have
and
her hand-
ruins
she
every
wa-
single
she wa-
IP in existence.
She wants to have her hand on a bursting geyser. I feel like we're hearing a certain amount of repression here.
Yeah, maybe so.
And
Also-
with a lot of energy.
Gross.
When did Maggie Gyllenhaal start looking like someone's grandma?
We're old, sir. Get over it.
Jesus.
Yes.
What?
Nothing.
And I don't know if I've said this out loud before. Again, maybe I'll get in trouble, but I actually think that when I really became a director was actually, I think, the first time, that the morning that Trump was first elected. I think I was like, I have a lot more to say than I've been saying.
It's simple. They're scared. And can you blame Maggie Gyllenhaal? She has to have seen her own reflection by now. Look, you almost have to feel for them. Marxism was normalized in Hollywood over 100 years ago. These pretentious pricks spend months on a film set playing pretend for a living, surrounded only by fellow travelers. Off hours, it's all intern cocktail parties. They all go to the same schools, attend the same fundraisers, and rut with the same retards. Absent contact with a Walmart shopper for years at a stretch, they gradually lose the ability to weigh social exigency against the need to evangelize their vapid politics and keep their yaps shut for the sake of social interaction or the continuance of their career. Then some journalist, every bit as leftist as they are, but also very much aware that clicks equal cash, tease them up with a political question in their very first promotional interview, and out pours the Marxist mouth diarrhea. Every time, it's nigh on a reflex. Yet we should honestly be openly appreciative of these flagrant displays of bicoastal insularity. Every time the Lexus libs start in with the Stalinisms, a fleet of Zoomers and Gen Alphas is red-pilled, because it drives home like a railroad spike to the sternum that Hollywood, however many muff movies they may have recently canceled for commercial concerns, are still waiting, puckered and prepped to bend us over the wine cabinet and make us all a real woman. You know, like Elliot Page. And I think another element of the decline is, well, what woke BS hasn't already been swallowed, digested, vomited, eaten, and inevitably shat out again by the public at this point? In 1995, this would have been edgier than Hunter Schafer's jawline, but in 2026, after a freshly pronoun pinko assassinated Charlie Kirk on national TV, swapping out whites for blacks and balls for boobs is about as incendiary as a church potluck. Now, I've heard edgier jokes at a church potluck. Don't let the music industry fool you, folks. It ain't the 90s anymore. We've had a nappy-headed female rocketeer fall out as firing troon recruits into the Brotherhood of Steel. X-Men's got gay Colossus, gay Iceman, and a gay audience. Hell, it'd be easier to list the remaining X-Men who don't own the greatest hits of Liza Minnelli at this point, and Marvel ain't muff-raking alone. DC turned Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy into point guards for the WNBA, to say nothing of Bat Dong and Stupor Boy. At what point does the new sexual frontier turn into a bog standard homo on the range? Eventually that shit gets more tired looking than, well, Maggie Gyllenhaal, which is...
Okay, all right. I can't go any further. That was farther than I intended to go with that, but I think it did well. So here we are. Hollywood is both so self-insular that they're completely out of touch with anything in the actual heart of America, and at the same time completely on the payroll and the pulse of political love's current thing now.
And that load of whiny claptrap that we just heard from Maggie Gyllenhaal is such a great microcosm, I think, of the whole phenomenon that we're talking about, because you can see right there in her attitude that she has mentally unshackled the concept of professional success from the concept of professional achievement. She thinks in her mind that because I am a woman director, any picture I make should be a big hit and make a lot of money. And if it's not a big hit and doesn't make a lot of money, it is because people hate women and they hate women directors. So I win either way. I never have to be responsible for my own professional failures because they aren't really my fault. People just hate women directors because the world is so intolerably goddamn sexist.
When I succeed, it is my expertise. When I fail, it's because you're a hater.
Yes. When I fail, it is because I am being held down by the patriarchy.
All right. I heard a quote today, and I want to do this one. I might do it badly, but I'm going to try. I looked into your cup to see if you have enough, but you looked into my cup to see if I had more than you. And that is the distinction between these people and those people when it comes down to it. Any sense at all?
How long do you think the woke Hollywood era will end when the pictures that are already in production wind up getting finished and released? Will we see a clean break there? Because we're starting to see lots of personnel turnover. A lot of the most notorious studio executives are starting to fall by the wayside. So it looks like there is a desire in these corporate boardrooms to pull back from this stuff to some extent. So do you think there will be an identifiable breaking point in the near future, or do you think it will be more of a slowly sustained death rattle?
So if this was a viable business proposition that would work and stand on its own, you would have networks breaking away from Hollywood to perform these actions on their own, and they would be profitable ventures that wouldn't need any explanation. However, they are not. And so instead, they subvert the profitable IPs available in order to broadcast their political message and try to indoctrinate an entire generation of people because superheroes are gay.
You're exactly right. If this stuff was as broadly appealing as they insist it is, then they wouldn't have to hollow out existing popular, well-respected IPs into skin suits for woke tardedness and stuff them full of wokeness and throw them out there and trying to make their money on the reputation that this brand or this IP previously had. We can just stuff it full of our politics and people will still like it, right? But no, they won't. They will actually hate it because they can see what you're doing and they don't want you to do it, and they've had just about enough of it.
Let's consider Black Snape for a moment. The left, these wokerati individuals cannot seem to conceive of why Black Snape took such a huge backlash. And they just can't grasp why people cared enough to have something to say about it. They don't get it. And really what it comes down to is there are very few things more English in the modern world than Harry Potter. Quidditch matches, the entire backdrop of that entire fantasy setting. And while we don't have a necessary issue with there being black wizards, we have a problem with a distinctly white English gentrified individual being race swapped because why? I mean, if you'd done Sirius Black, we could have at least applied a misunderstanding of reading the literature to it, and it wouldn't have had nearly as much of a backlash. And plus, that would be Harry Potter's godfather, and it would have, they still would have bitched, but it wouldn't have been as serious a thing. Sirius Black is the quintessential stiff school teacher. The whole English boarding school concept of very, very strict and stern rules, that was Sirius Black. And casting a black man in a white role in that case actually oversteps some sort of subconscious line that causes people to do like the uncanny valley thing and flinch away from it.
Yes. And it is even worse when you start reaching into actual history and race swapping real historical figures like we have seen the BBC do repeatedly in recent years with their Black Anne Boleyn and all. I can't even think of all the white female historical figures they have tried to turn black in the last decade, but it's not a small number. Queen Charlotte, they tried to turn her black too. Queen Charlotte, Anne Boleyn, they're not the only ones, but
William
it is a
Shakespeare.
recurring theme. Yeah,
In
William
fact,
Shakespeare.
they're trying to say William Shakespeare was an old black woman when she was writing all those plays.
It's the same thing they do with. It's the same thing the left does with Jesus Christ that they have always done with Jesus Christ. Shakespeare is probably number 2 on their favorite list, but as the generations go by, every generation of secular leftists tries to turn Jesus into the same thing that they like. So we hear, Jesus was gay, Jesus was communist, Jesus was trans, Jesus was whatever current thing I like today. And they do the same thing all the time with goddamn Shakespeare. They try to make him gay, they try to make him trans, they try to make him black, they try to make him a chick. But what if he was just a white Englishman? Would that be so terribly intolerable? I mean, would it really? Does he have to be something that wokesters like? Why can't he just be a white Englishman from the 17th century? Is that really so awful? But I guess people find that so intolerable that it has to be changed. And same thing with Jesus. Been doing that with Jesus for years, man.
So, all right. So let's take that one head on. I have less of an issue with a dark-skinned Jesus than I do with a dark-skinned William Shakespeare.
Oh, absolutely. If indeed he existed, he almost certainly would have had dark skin.
Well, according to Lazarus Long and Robert Heinlein, there's a very good chance that he was redheaded.
Yeah, there's a non-zero chance.
Right?
Yeah.
So here's an interesting conundrum. If he was redheaded, aren't you trusting a soulless individual to save your soul?
Oh, what now?
All right, so I made something. I'm going to drop it right now because nobody's donated and I want people to see it. So here's the thing.
I need you to work this Saturday. No problem. I might be late, though. The transports are slow on weekends. What time will you get here? Monday.
Your Majesty, what do you think about Luke?
I think he's a loser.
Yo, Duque!
Yo.
What's
So that's anybody donate more than $2, they'll catch that one on the flip side.
You know,
I might have got a little too high for that one.
I like that joke more and more as the years go on because more and more young people don't understand it.
Right? One of the most ridiculous things that I've ever seen in my life. I can't remember what. I think we were at an Applebee's or a freaking something like Ruby Tuesdays or something. I can't remember. It was one of those. And we were sitting in like one of the back booths over there, and one of the guys next to me in the booth next to me looked over at the guy with him and was like, "What's up?" And the other guy said, "What's up?" And it went all the way around the restaurant except for like a few tables that had young people at it. They were looking around
Yep.
What the hell is going on?
Exactly.
And there were some women
And that makes
involved
it
too,
awesome.
but it was almost exclusively men. There were like 2 waitresses that got involved with it. And it was a cultural moment that made me glad to be a fucking American, quite frankly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you're too young to remember watching TV in 2000, you have no idea what any of that is about. And you think people are doing some weird religious ritual, and I am here for it. I am absolutely here for it.
There's one aspect of that particular skit that a lot of people don't understand because they're not old enough to understand how landlines work. When they all start picking up the different phones and joining in, the modern audience doesn't understand how that's functional. How does that work? They don't get it initially. You have to explain it to them, and then they still really don't get the joke, but well, whatever, they'll laugh at it.
Oh, they can't even get their heads around the idea of a telephone being physically attached to the wall.
Right? Having one in every room.
Yeah.
Like, I had a cousin, and I'm not... He worked for the phone company, and so one of his flexes was the fact that he had a telephone in every single room of his house.
And none of those people ever had to live in a world where if you wanted to talk to your girlfriend on the phone, you had to talk to her in the kitchen in front of your family.
That, and you had to talk to her mom or her dad before you got to talk to her in most cases. And you better hope her dad wasn't drinking a little bit, or you end up having a conversation like I did, which, by the way, actually worked out for me in the long run. All of those people still love me and still hate her. But I got her uncle, and her uncle was like, "So what do you plan on doing with my niece?" And I was like, "Well, I was, basically going to talk to her on the phone. I don't believe there's any reason not to." He's like, "Yeah, well, I've got her out there cutting the grass right now." And I was like, okay, cool. The
mom or the dad would answer the phone, and you had to be sufficiently polite to get through the gatekeeper and actually be allowed to talk to your girlfriend. And if you weren't sufficiently polite to the parent, then no joy for you. You're not getting to talk to your girlfriend on the phone. You can fuck right off, kid.
Right. I never got shut down at the gate like that. The closest I ever came to that was and it wasn't even a chick in this case. It was actually a buddy of mine, and I call him up, and his mom answers like, "Jim ain't here," and hangs up. I was like, Jesus Christ! That's like nobody called this place. But here's the problem. Jim had called me and asked me to call his mom and tell her some shit because she wasn't answering the phone at the time, right?
Okay.
So I gave he was driving or something, wasn't going to be able to get in touch with her, and so I gave it like 45 minutes, an hour, called her, and she answered with "Jim ain't here," hangs up, and then I like sat there for a minute, and I looked at my mom and was like, "I'm supposed to tell her something from Jim, so I'll call her back." I call her back, "Jim ain't here," and hung up. So I just decided I was going to call until this bitch actually listened long enough for me to explain why her son didn't get off the bus. Right? Like, he's not kidnapped. There's no point in putting in a missing persons bulletin. He's on his way to Athens to go participate in some testing. And, there you go.
I got one for you. Do you remember the tactic of making a free payphone call? When you don't have any coins, you can act like you're calling collect, and the collect call the recording says state your name so that the other party can know who's calling and whether they want to accept the charges. But instead of saying your name, you very quickly say the message you want to convey. So you say, "I've got weed, come over," instead of your name, and then the person on the other end doesn't have to accept the charges. We have concluded our business and not paid anything. Bob's your uncle. We win.
Right. I might have been a little bit. So I had access to the front office, so I never made payphone calls anyway. I always went up to the office and talked to the folks up there and used the phone. And it didn't make a damn who I was calling. I once ordered pizza to a fucking metal shop at the school. So like, I didn't give a damn. But when I got into AV classes and I started looking into all that stuff, I stumbled across the notorious Tone Box, and one of my nerd friends made one, and that thing floated around for 5 or 6 years in possession of different people doing nefarious shit. But what it did was allow you to walk up to a payphone, pop it off, click, click, click 3 times, and then play this. And on the other end of it, it would register some kind of emergency signal or something, and let you make a free phone call, untraced even.
Oh, they were simpler
what the hell was up with that?
Oh, it's time for me to do the
we
thing.
went over. My bad. Let's do the thing. Trying to find the thing to do. Damn it, do the thing. Okay,
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius. Hope you had a happy Masters Sunday. Congratulations to Rory McIlroy for becoming only the 4th ever repeat winner of the Masters. If you care about golf, it's a pretty auspicious thing. But anyway, if you don't, that's fine too. We hope you enjoyed the monologue. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. We sure did. We hope you have a great day tomorrow and a fine day after that and an edifying remainder of your week. And we will see you back here next Sunday evening, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. As we always do, we will have more fun and more tomfoolery and more hijinks as we always do, but you would never be in doubt about that. Have a great evening. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
Sorry, I'm working on it.